Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In a major victory for the LGBTQ community and civil rights, the Supreme Court ruled Monday a landmark civil rights law protects gay, bisexual, and transgender people from discrimination in the workplace. The historic 6-3 ruling comes after decades of legal battles and campaigning. The ruling was penned by one of the court's most conservative justices, Trump appointee Neil Gorsuch. Chief Justice John Roberts joined the majority opinion in stating Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which forbids workplace discrimination on the basis of sex, applies to gay and transgender people. At least half of the 50 states previously allowed employers to fire workers for being LGBTQ. We'll have more on this story after headlines. In Atlanta, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms has ordered the police department to alter its use of force policy following the police killing of Rayshard Brooks, an unarmed African-American man who was shot dead in the parking lot of a Wendy's. Police first approached Brooks because he'd fallen asleep at the drive-thru. Bottoms described his killing as a murder. On Monday, Ray Brooks' family spoke to the media. This is his cousin, Jamako.
If you ask how old this young black man was, look at your children when you see them laugh. That innocence, that joy, that pureness of soul. And you had a glimpse of what we lost. You have a glimpse of what it feels like.
Meanwhile, the Atlanta Police Department has revealed the officer who shot Brooks, Garrett Rolfe, had been the subject of several citizen complaints dating back to 2015, but no action was ever taken against him. Rolfe was fired after Friday's shooting. Newly released disciplinary records show the other officer at the scene, Devin Brosnan, also discharged his firearm Friday. Brosnan has been placed on administrative leave. In news about the police killing of George Floyd, newly released audio shows a 9/11 dispatcher in Minneapolis raised concerns about her supervisor about how Floyd was treated after seeing surveillance video from a camera near the scene while it was happening.
I don't know if they had used force or not. They got something out of the back of the squad, and all of them sat on this man. So I don't know if they needed you or not, but they haven't said anything to me yet.
In another newly released recording from that day, an eyewitness called 911 to say officers had, quote, pretty much just killed this guy that wasn't resisting arrest, unquote. At least 7 Minneapolis police officers have resigned in the aftermath of George Floyd's killing. Police officers have also quit in other parts of the country, including Atlanta, where Ray Brooks was killed. As anti-racism and police brutality protests continue across the country, police in Albuquerque, New Mexico, have detained several members of an armed right-wing militia after a protester was shot on Monday. The protester has been hospitalized in critical condition. The shooting occurred as protesters tried to topple a statue of Juan de Oñate, a Spanish colonizer who massacred Native Americans 400 years ago. Earlier in the day, another statue of Oñate was removed in the town of Alcade in New Mexico. In Tallahassee, Florida, police confirmed Monday they found the dead body of a 19-year-old African-American Black Lives Matter activist, Toyin Salou, who had been missing for just over a week. Nearby, the body of 75-year-old Victoria Sims, a white woman and AARP volunteer, was also found. Salou was last seen on June 6. She tweeted that same day that a man had sexually assaulted her. A man, Aaron Glee Jr., has been arrested in connection with the two killings. Toyin's friends and supporters are calling for justice for the activist, who is a regular presence at Black Lives Matter protests. Here she is speaking following the police killing of Tony McDade, a black transgender man in Tallahassee last month.
Tony McDade was a black trans man, okay? Amen. We're not doing this. We're doing this for him. We're doing this for our brothers and our sisters who got shot. But we're doing this for every black person. Because at the end of the day, I cannot take my skin color off. I cannot mask this shit, okay? Everywhere I go, I'm profiled whether I like it or not.
We'll have more on the murders of black trans people later in the broadcast. Meanwhile, in Akron, Ohio, protesters gathered Monday at the site where an 18-year-old black teenager, Nikia Crawford, was shot and killed Sunday while driving her grandmother. She'd graduated from high school less than 2 weeks before she was killed. Witnesses say a white man shot Crawford from a car that police are now trying to locate. Nikia Crawford's family believes the incident was racially motivated. In California, the FBI, the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Central District of California are reviewing investigations into the recent deaths of 2 black men who were both found hanging from trees 10 days apart and about 60 miles apart. 24-year-old Robert Fuller was found in Palmdale last week. His death was originally described as a suicide by local authorities, but his family says they don't believe this was the cause, and many are calling his death a lynching. 38-year-old Malcolm Harsh was found hanging from a tree in nearby Victorville 10 days before. No official cause of death has been released. The United Nations Human Rights Council has announced it will hold a debate on racism and police brutality in the United States Wednesday. This comes in response to a proposal by a group of African countries led by Burkina Faso. The nations recently expressed alarm over, quote, recent incidents of police brutality against peaceful demonstrators defending the rights of Africans and of people of African descent, unquote. In other international news, the U.S. Embassy in Seoul has removed a large Black Lives Matter banner and pride flag from the building's facade. The U.S. ambassador had approved both, but on Monday, the State Department ordered them removed. The New York Police Department has announced it's dismantling its plainclothes anti-crime unit. The 600 officers in the unit will be reassigned. In 2018, The Intercept reported plainclothes anti-crime officers have been involved in 31% of fatal police shootings in New York since 2000. Meanwhile, Albuquerque, New Mexico has announced plans to create a new civilian department made up of social workers and others to respond to non-emergency 911 calls. And Seattle City Council Monday voted unanimously to ban police use of tear gas and chokeholds. In Georgia, the state legislature reopened Monday after being shut down since March due to the pandemic, with a bipartisan call to pass a hate crimes bill. Georgia is one of 4 states with no such laws. In other policing news, the Supreme Court has declined to hear cases involving the legal doctrine known as qualified immunity. Critics of the doctrine said it has shielded many police officers and departments from being sued. In other Supreme Court news, justices rejected Trump's challenge to California's state sanctuary law in a major victory for immigrant rights advocates. The move leaves in place the ruling by San Francisco's Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which said local officials do not have to help immigration agents enforce federal laws. The Supreme Court also declined to take up a number of Second Amendment cases challenging state gun control laws, including open carry restrictions in Maryland and New Jersey. In a major blow for environmental and indigenous activists, the Supreme Court ruled the 600-mile Atlantic Coast Pipeline, built by Dominion Energy and Duke Energy, can cross beneath the Appalachian Trail in Virginia's George Washington National Forest. Only Justices Elena Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor dissented in the 7-2 ruling. Friends of the Earth said, quote, if built, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline would spew toxins, harm wildlife, and disproportionately impact the 30,000-plus native peoples living in its path. Today, SCOTUS ruled to let it proceed, ignoring communities and environment in favor of the fossil fuel industry, they said. As coronavirus cases in the United States top 211,000, with over 116,000 reported deaths, and the number expected really to be far higher, the Food and Drug Administration's pulled its emergency use authorization for anti-malarial drugs hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine, saying, quote, it's no longer reasonable to believe they may be effective in treating COVID-19. The drugs have been repeatedly touted by President Trump, even as multiple studies showed they were not only ineffective for COVID-19, but potentially could result in heart attack or death. When asked about this latest news, Trump continued to defend the drugs on Monday.
People that were, like, seriously ill, like they weren't going to make it, let's give them a little hydroxy, and then they don't make it, and they say, oh, wow, maybe the president was wrong. All I know is that we've had some tremendous reports.
President Trump also blamed increased testing for the country's high number of coronavirus cases. If you don't test, you don't have any cases, he told reporters. Vice President Mike Pence echoed this idea in a call with governors Monday, encouraging them to adopt the same message that more testing is leading to rising numbers rather than community spread due to relaxed restrictions. But the data suggests recent spikes in cases are much greater than what would be simply reflected by higher number of tests being administered. Cases continue to surge in Arizona, where over 4,400 new cases were reported over the weekend. Arizona's outbreak started surging in early June, 2 weeks after lifting its stay-at-home order. Arizona's infection rate per capita is now more than 3 times higher than New York State. Florida, which is also seeing a spike in cases, reported Friday 3,400 children have tested positive for coronavirus. 10 of those have a serious inflammatory condition, which has been described by health officials as similar to Kawasaki disease or toxic shock syndrome. Confirmed coronavirus cases have now topped 8 million worldwide, with over 430,000 reported deaths. Latin America remains a coronavirus hotspot. In Peru and Bolivia, hospitals are on the brink as they grapple with a surge of patients and a lack of resources and equipment. In Chile, where armed soldiers are charged with enforcing curfews and other lockdown measures, a new health minister was appointed after his predecessor quit over the government response to the pandemic and amidst questions over the accuracy of the official death toll, which now stands at over 3,300. Meanwhile, in Nicaragua, anger's mounting against the government of President Daniel Ortega, which has refused to order social distancing and has encouraged large gatherings. Medical professionals say they're being retaliated against for speaking out. This is Dr. Marianela Lopez, who says she was fired after suggesting a voluntary national quarantine to halt the surge in cases.
We have seen an absence of health authorities. The president is absent. It has been more than 30 days since the first case appeared. That is impressive. We have seen the measures taken in Central American countries. The president's in charge, the ministers of health. What we have had is a lack of information and little credibility.
Officially, there have been over 1,400 cases and 55 deaths reported in Nicaragua, but a recent independent study suggests the true death toll could be 20 times higher. The federal government has scheduled the execution of 4 prisoners this summer, including 3 next month. They will be the first federal executions in the United States in nearly 2 decades after the Trump administration reinstated federal capital punishment last year. Reuters is reporting the Trump administration's paving the way for U.S. military contractors to sell armed drones to governments that have previously been barred from such purchases by reinterpreting a Cold War-era arms treaty. The Departments of Commerce, Energy, Justice, and Homeland Security approved the new interpretation to the 33-year-old treaty last month. The first drone sales are expected to be approved this summer. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are expected to be among the first countries to purchase the weapons. In Russia, former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan was sentenced Monday to 16 years of hard labor after being convicted of espionage. Whelan was arrested in Moscow last year after reportedly being given a flash drive containing classified information while visiting Russia for a wedding. Whelan's denied all charges, says he's being framed. Some have speculated his arrest was retaliation for the arrest of Russian gun rights activist Maria Butina, who in 2018 pleaded guilty to conspiring to act as a Russian agent without registering with the Justice Department. A South Korean news agency is reporting North Korea appears to have blown up an inter-Korean liaison office. North Korea had threatened to destroy the office, among other threats to South Korea in recent days. North Korea warned today it's ready to enter the demilitarized zone between the two Koreas, reportedly partly in response to defectors in South Korea sending propaganda material to the north. A group of investigative reporters found nearly half of all Nigerian asylum seekers who arrived in the Netherlands last year effectively disappeared. They say most of the nearly 1,000 unaccounted-for refugees were likely forced into sex or drug trafficking. The reporters say the pattern is widely seen across other European nations and also affects refugees from other African countries. The International Organization for Migration says up to 80% of Nigerian women who migrate to Europe are potential victims of trafficking. And the European Human Rights Court has ruled in favor of a group of activists who were convicted by French courts for their support of the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. The activists campaigned at French supermarkets in 2009 and 10, raising awareness of the oppression of Palestinians, calling for a boycott of Israeli products. The European Human Rights Court ruled their conviction violated the free speech of the activists and ordered France to pay them damages. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the Quarantine Report. When we come back, we look at a major victory for LGBTQ community and civil rights. The Supreme Court ruled Monday a landmark civil rights law protects gay, bisexual, and transgender people from discrimination in the workplace. Stay with us.